So one of my favorite casual pastimes when I was a kid was going through my father's VHS collection and basically watching whatever I found, usually meaning I was watching stuff from long before I was born. One of the things I remember finding is a hilarious film titled The Man Who Saw Tomorrow, begrudgingly starring a Frozen Peas-era Orson Welles. The film covers Nostradamus' vague and bizarre texts and claims that they could predict the future. It not only makes the case for recent catastrophes and events being proof of that, but also goes out of its way to predict what would happen in the next 20 years. And man oh man, do the late 80s get crazy, my dudes.
May 1988.
The great famine do I see drawing near, a famine so great and so long that man shall become a man-eater.
In 1994. So this could be the year in which the Third World War begins. And the Soviet Union and the United States will be friends. And after a peace for 1,000 years...
I could watch Orson Welles be wrong about the future all day. Couldn't you? Every few years, a couple different stations will essentially remake The Man Who Saw Tomorrow, entirely because every version of the film that's ever been made has gotten all of its predictions wrong. In fact, apparently the version I watched as a kid wasn't the original, but was instead a Gulf War-style 1991 remake that also got everything wrong. This trend continued up to and beyond December 2012, when many people were very convinced that the world was going to come to an end.
When the sun is rising in this dark rift, it's going to be bad.
In the years leading up to this, History Channel filled its schedule to the brim with programming meant to capitalize off of this. There was a time where you could turn on the channel at any time of the day and they would almost certainly be discussing prophecies of the end of the world. Today, a lot of these things are really hard to find because History Channel has no motivation to redistribute them. Not only is it hard to find them on DVD, but the History Channel website is almost scrubbed clean of any evidence of them. And the reason is that these shows are embarrassing, and are a full frontal look at just how useless this kind of programming actually is. Let's just hit up Pirate Bay and see if that has anything. Barely any cedars, but we'll see if we can get some of these to work.
You've got mail.
Oh, I got an email. I wonder what that's about. Oh no. Oh no! My internet provider found out I've been watching movies online. They're gonna call the police. I'm gonna go to jail. They're gonna waterboard me until I tell them where I downloaded my AVI of Shrek 2. If only I had been smart and had downloaded NordVPN, the sponsor of this very video, which would have made it impossible for these corporations to track my IP back to my home address. On top of this, it would have stopped hackers from trying to steal my personal data, and would have allowed me to enjoy streaming content in other countries. And all I would have had to do was go to nordvpn.com/Quinton, that's nordvpn.com/Quinton, to get 70% off of a 3-year plan with an additional month entirely free. What was I talking about? So, why did people think the world was going to end on December 21st, 2012? Well, it stems partially from a misunderstanding of the Maya calendar. This is what a typical date on the Maya long date calendar looks like. When we take that and convert it into Arabic numbers, it looks like this. This might seem overwhelming at first, but it's essentially just a slightly more nested version of our calendar system. You see this 5th number on the far right? This goes up every 24 hours. It represents a single day passing. Every 20 days, that number resets to 0, and the 4th digit goes up by 1. The 4th digit is basically a Mayan month. It's like our months, except there's 20 days every single time, and there's no Halloween or Christmas. When 17 Mayan months pass, that number also resets, and the middle digit goes up. The middle digit translates to 360 days, roughly 1 year. Every 20 Mayan years, the middle digit crosses over, and every 354 years, the next to last digit also does the same thing. The far left digit is called a Baktun today, and marks the cycle starting over, which happens every 144,000 days. This is what the calendar looked like on December 20th, 2012. You can see it's sort of a mess, it's all these numbers, it's a mathematical conundrum to figure out what all this means, and here's what happened that very night. Pretty cool, huh? It's like watching an odometer turn over. The Maya culture had a creation myth which stated that the gods formed this world at the moment where all of these numbers were at 0, which in our calendar was roughly the year 3114 BCE. They also claimed that our world was actually the 4th created by the gods, who kept rebooting until they got villagers who weren't ugly, and that the 3rd world was erased on its 13th Baktun. So would our world be destroyed on the exact same date? The Maya certainly didn't seem to think so. While they occasionally mention the date as noteworthy within incomplete texts, their planetary charts span into the 15th Baktun, about 1500 years into our future. One could speculate that this is indeed what they thought would happen on the 13th Baktun, but you could also imagine that it was just exciting to imagine that their world would one day be older than the version that came before it. At this stage of the game, we're really just guessing. What really happened to lead up to the 2012 phenomenon was that the idea of the world ending became this suspenseful bit of socioculture that people really latched onto. This was bred not only by sci-fi shows like The X-Files referencing the date, but also decades of different figures and programs exploiting fear in the public of the uncertainty in the future. Arguably, this started in the late 1970s, when many televangelists attempted to breed dependence in their business models by selling predictions of the second coming of Jesus Christ. Pat Robertson specifically was very adamant that before the 1980s were through, civilization would come to an end and only righteous TV-watching Christians would be spared.
In I'd give it 1982, but date setting is dangerous.
Around the same time, a parody religion titled The Church of the Subgenius began growing popular among some counterculture teenagers and college students. Its core teachings were based around a fictional 1950s businessman named J.R. or Bob Dobbs, who had made spiritual connection with aliens and had been shown future events. The church soon presented their own apocalypse theory to compete with those of televangelists, replacing the fear in Christ with a post-ironic take on UFO culture, purposefully unbelievable and soaked in science fiction nonsense. According to the text, there exists a planet at the furthest reaches of our galaxy known as Planet X. In the future, our planet and Planet X will cross paths, and this will mark the end to civilization as we know it.
On July 5th, 1998 at 7 a.m., the so-called men from Planet X, or Xists, shall make a mass landing on this planet. The children of Bob shall be rewarded at this foretold rupture, this day of judgment, when all those who paid their church dues will be lifted up in power and glory to gain new homes and bodies aboard the pleasure saucers of the sex goddesses, all the while watching the hapless pinks twitch and bleat and wail in the death throes of their world.
Inexplicably, this joke conspiracy invented by a joke cult actually evolved into being something people unironically believed in around a decade later. In 1995, a woman named Nancy Leiter gained notoriety for an online blog she created titled Zeta Talk. On Zeta Talk, she made a series of outrageous claims that, you could argue, were directly ripped off from the story of Bob Dobbs. Leiter claimed that she had gained a spiritual connection with a group of aliens, and that they had shown her a vision of the future. She stated that these aliens were from a planet hidden at the edge of our galaxy called Planet X, and predicted that in the next few years a catastrophic event would occur when Planet X and Earth came into contact. Her blog widely speculated on what would happen once Planet X arrived, inventing numerous different scenarios and situations. For instance, one claim she had was that the planets aligning along with Planet X would cause the magnetic fields of Earth to totally shift, causing devastating effects, with this taking place on May the 5th, 2000. She later changed this date to 2003, which became the concrete, accepted date until that passed as well.
So you've survived the pole shift. Congratulations. Well, now what? Can't go shopping as the roads are all torn up. Bridges are down. Your local stores have probably been looted by now in any case. Perhaps you've stocked up. You have canned or dried foods and lots of clean water at hand. Supplies allow a transition time, getting over the shock of the pole shift, treating the injured and saying goodbye to those who didn't make it. Having a strong cup of coffee and a plate of rice and beans during this time almost seems a necessity.
I hear that. 90% of humanity is dead, but as long as I got my coffee, who gives a damn?
This tangent might seem entirely pointless to the discussion, but the majority of beliefs about 2012 in pseudo-historical circles were copied and pasted from this woman's blog, which, again, seems to have totally ripped off its content from a 1980s parody religion.
The Zeta Talk Triangle appeared multiple times in crop circles in Horicon Marsh in Wisconsin in 2003, my home state, making the point that Zeta Talk has validity, and Nancy, as the Zeta Talk emissary, should be trusted.
Considering that the information presented in these documentaries has such a disheveled and confusing lineage, it's not shocking that there's actually not a lot of agreement in the content over what would really happen in 2012. Depending on where you got your info, either alignments of the planets would create the previously mentioned pole shift, causing storms that would destroy cities all over the world, a comet would fall from the sky, wiping out humans like it did the dinosaurs, Earth would collide with Planet X, destroying both planets, aliens from Planet X would return, marking a new age in human history, or maybe just all of those things would happen at once. Y2K really had its branding down, didn't it? Computers get confused and think it's 1900, they all short circuit. Boom, simple. Most of the claims these documentaries peddled were complete nonsense, as you can imagine. For instance, it was often mentioned in these productions how the Sun, Earth, and the center of the Milky Way galaxy would line up, something which is supposedly astronomically rare.
For the first time in 26,000 years, the Earth is lining up with the galactic center of our Milky Way galaxy.
The Earth will be in exact alignment with the Sun and the center of the Milky Way galaxy.
The Sun will align with the center of the Milky Way galaxy.
The Earth, the Sun, and this birth canal, the dark rift, are all in perfect alignment. And this only happens
every 25,800 years.
Every 26,000 years.
And that sounds pretty impressive when you hear it. How could it be a coincidence that this happens on the exact day of this important Mayan date? But according to the skeptics website nasa.gov, that happens literally every December. And as you can probably tell from all these collages, these experts were all using each other as sources, and thus probably no one is really sure who is coming up with all this bullshit. What's more important to these guest speakers isn't really their information being right, but their own biases being proven correct. And if that means seeing patterns where patterns don't exist, then by God, they're gonna do that. One of the first programs to exploit 2012 anxiety was a 2005 History Channel show titled Decoding the Past, which attempted to use historical texts to make apocalypse predictions. The most memorable episode of this show is titled The Bible Code, and makes the case that if you type the Bible out with no spaces, you can use it as a crossword puzzle, and words that are closer to each other will predict the future.
In order to perform a search, the letters are arranged in a grid or matrix, making it easier to perform the search and allowing the results to be clearly shown. Watergate. Who is he? President. But he will be kicked out. Muslim airplane attack. Twin Towers. Twice. Chemical weapons. And Becca. Damascus, which could be interpreted to mean that the much sought-after weapons of mass destruction may have been sent from Iraq through Damascus, Syria to the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon.
Yeah, okay, right, yeah, the weapons of mass destruction Bush keeps talking about are real. A very good prediction to make in 2005.
The code seems to suggest that man's end may come in the form of a comet hitting the Earth in the year 2012. Comet, 5772, Earth annihilated. But another code matrix seems to suggest a different outcome. Comet, it will be crumbled. I will tear to pieces. 2012.
Oof. Big thanks for choosing that second one, Jesus. Good to know that our future is constantly a multiple choice test that you're just bullshitting. 2012 documentaries are amazing, because all these theorists have no consistency in their theories, so it's literally just the guest speakers randomly making stuff up because they have no idea how the world is supposed to really end.
The Earth's magnetic field is in the process of changing and perhaps weakening in spots, and anybody who's ever watched Star Trek, the shields are down, bad.
Within the next year, there probably won't be any ice on the North Pole in the summertime, for the first time in all of recorded human history.
And once you change the rotation of the Earth, you do have a chance of causing huge effects.
Could it replace the land with the sea and the sea with the land?
What? That's the one. No, that's the one we're going with. That's what happened, man. That's how 2012 went down. The land and the sea, they swapped places. This bit went up there, this bit went down there. It was like Freaky Friday, but everyone died. Anyways, y'all want to see some galactic alignment titties?
Closer examination of this image reveals an intriguing symbolism. Sagittarius's arrow and the woman form a cross that resembles the galactic alignment.
Wow, dude, good find there. Good Easter egg you uncovered with your detective skills on that one. Can we make this the new loss? Like this is 2012. Look, I found plenty of documentaries about 2012 that were essentially nothing but fear-baiting about how horrible it's going to be, with no other consensus beyond that. Anyone can do this, and they're all exactly the same. But it takes a true man, a true legend, a legitimate hero to not only say the world might end tomorrow, but also, I'm gonna stop it.
The Lost Crystal Skulls. Legend tells us there are 13 of them. Together, they are said to contain the secrets of the universe. Secrets that some claim will save mankind from an Armageddon prophesied by the ancient Mayan calendar. Legends tell us they must be reunited to prevent the coming doomsday. With the clock ticking, can we track down the remaining skulls before it's too late? Join us as we attempt to solve the mystery of the Crystal Skulls.
I want to give a big thanks to this person in my Patreon Discord who found a copy of this after I described what I remembered about it in the chat. I've constantly been thinking about this since the first time I saw it as a kid, and I'm so excited to share it with you guys. Airing on Sci-Fi back when Sci-Fi was spelled right, this documentary is based around the idea that if this random dude can find the remaining crystal skulls, he can use their raw power to stop the world ending in 2012. Now, some of you might be shocked to find out that the crystal skulls are a real thing outside of Indiana Jones, and you'll be perhaps even more surprised to find out that they actually aren't a real thing at all. In the late 1800s, snobby people around the world started collecting ancient artifacts, and because there was more demand than supply, forgeries flooded the market. These crystal skulls were one of the many things that were invented by European scam artists. And it was so successful that one skull ended up in a British museum. Years later, a man named Mitchell Hedges claimed to have found an identical skull during a Mayan excavation in the 1920s. He stated that he snuck it out of the country and kept it a secret for 2 decades. However, recent documents have proved that he simply bought it from a collector around 1943 and then invented a tall tale about it. All testing of the known skulls have consistently proved that they were made with tools that are modern by nature, dating them essentially to just before they were discovered. This is so well known that even the Indiana Jones film is written with the conceit that while the skulls are real within the universe, all of the skulls we found in the real world are entirely fraudulent, with Mitchell Hedges' name being used as a synonym for fakery.
There are a number of crystal skulls in the world. I saw one in the British Museum. Interesting craftsmanship, but that's about it.
When documentaries like this describe the story of the 13 crystal skulls and say, according to legend, What they mean is the stories that Mitchell Hedges says the Maya told him. And since all evidence seems to suggest that Hedges was a pathological liar and made the entire story up, this implies that these legends don't really exist. Fun fact, around the time 2012 was happening, someone claimed to have found a crystal skull in the former home of high-ranking Nazi Heinrich Himmler. This was really obviously a hoax, but during a photo shoot with the thing, some guy dropped it and it broke. And then the Daily Mail ran an article saying that the world was gonna end and it was his fault. Going back to the sci-fi presentation we were looking at before, this is one of the funniest films I have ever seen in my entire life. The entire thing is this one guy wandering around different parts of Guatemala looking for the rest of the skulls, and he doesn't find shit. It's that for 90 minutes, it's entirely boring, and it's the greatest thing ever.
I feel that there's still a number of crystal skulls still left. I'm just kind of drawn to this place.
Yeah, this is an opening. This is a doorway, and I'm going to try to open it up and see what's down in this thing.
The clock is ticking. All of the original 13 crystal skulls must be found and in place before 2012.
Still ahead, a grueling hike leads to the unexpected. Have we stumbled on the remains of Atlantis?
I don't know, have you? I'm gonna have to keep watching. Can you imagine, like, going to some ancient civilization you've never gone to, and then just hiking around until you find the first slightly ancient thing you can see, and immediately going, oh shit, was this Atlantis? Did I just find it? Is this Atlantis?
There's this great scene where he comes across this random structure in the woods, which must be known to real archaeologists, and he's convinced that this is part of an underground secret structure that holds some of the remaining crystal skulls, and then he turns to the camera and says, I gotta apply for a permit. Yeah, it might take a few years, but once the paperwork is filled out, I can start excavating here. 2014 at the latest. Watch this thing he does with the machete.
He didn't.
Yeah, that's a classic archaeological move right there. Just shove a big knife into the place you're trying to excavate and see what sound it makes.
But Bill Holman is a man of action. He's an 8th degree grandmaster.
It's hard not to laugh at this guy, but at the same time, buried under all of this is a really sad element to the story. This guy was best friends with the 100-year-old daughter of Mitchell Hedges, and spent her last years taking care of her and talking about the skull. This was recorded about a year after she died. And it's pretty sad just how much he connects the hunt for the skulls with this memory of her, like finding the skulls would prove something. And this is what you consistently see in stories like this. It always seems like a perfect mix of total scam artists who are only in it for fame and fortune, and people who are so genuinely emotionally invested in a story being true that they can't bring themselves to let it go. And it makes dunking on these people almost not fun. Although on the other hand...
Is this Atlantis?
Whenever there's a prediction about the end of the world, we always come back around to the final step in our journey. Bargaining. When the predictors desperately want you to believe that they actually weren't wrong about their predictions and that they shouldn't be laughed at on the streets for their massive failure. The first thing you can try and do is claim that you technically weren't wrong, you just guesstimated some details incorrectly, and the things you got right are far more impressive. This is most commonly seen in predictions revolving around politics and war, and those which are interpreting the texts of figures like Nostradamus. So even if you say something entirely ridiculous, like,
Ted Kennedy may become president of the United States,
the sort of vague half-correctness in a couple of your other points will seem much more worthy of mention to people who are into that kind of thing. If you're currently writing a prediction and you want to be able to pull a stunt like this in the future, your best bet is to just throw in a sentence that sounds something like, In the future, there will be conflict in the Middle East.
The next major war to be fought in the world is going to be right here.
But most apocalypse theories aren't vague, they go straight to the fire and brimstone, and so they get absolutely everything wrong. So the next style of bargaining is to just yell, "Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs, I got the year wrong," as you continue to move your goalpost further and further down the line. When Pat's prediction of 1982 being the end didn't work out, he moved the year to 1985, and then 1996, and then 2007, before he finally took the L. Famously, when the 1998 prediction passed and aliens from Planet X did not arrive on Earth, many members of the Church of the Subgenius argued that the year had accidentally been read upside down, and that they would actually arrive in 8661. Other children of Bob argue that our calendar is simply incorrect, and that the year 1998 still hasn't happened. But I love 2012 bargaining specifically because it really started to happen before the date had even arrived, as these guest speakers realized that they had based their entire integrity in the world actually coming to an end. Either they were going to die, or they were going to be a joke for the rest of their lives. And so they started trying to pitch these compromises that were a lot less severe, but all of those compromises also definitely didn't happen.
Where will a spiritually based science lead us after December 21st of the year 2012?
I really don't think that there'll be any great shift on the morning of December 21st, 2012. The UFOs won't land, the comet won't hit that morning, but it'll be a point in which, looking back, we can all say, oh yeah, that's when it all ended.
I wish, man. I wish. Hear me out. Think about how better the world would be if it had actually ended in 2012. The stock market never would have crashed, poverty rate would be down to 0, we finally would have gotten Coney. This is a bad bit. Okay, so in a minute, I'm gonna do something which I really don't usually do on this channel, and that is I'm going to tell you guys about my next 2 videos. I'm going to tell you what those videos are going to be, and a sense of when they're going to be uploaded. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm pretty happy with what these 2 videos are going to be, but I'm also somewhat sure that YouTube just isn't going to push them at all, so I kind of need you guys to look out for them. But before that, I want to give another big thanks to today's sponsor, NordVPN.com. If you guys go to NordVPN.com/Quinton, you can get instant protection online with 70% off of a 3-year plan and 1 additional month entirely free. But what might be even more important is you can use Nord to watch more content by tapping into thousands of servers all over the world. So if you want to watch a show that's streaming in Canada, and only Canada for some reason, just go to Nord, click on the Canada button, and boom, the internet will think you're in Canada. It's really that simple. Plus, as I talked about earlier in this video, if you don't use services like Nord, it can be very easy for corporations to find your IP address if you use torrents online. It's too late for me though. I made the mistake of not using a VPN, and now I'm going straight to Guantanamo Bay when this is done. The FBI, I should have listened to that FBI warning. All the FBI does is arrest you for downloading movie, send death threats to MLK, eat hot chip, and lie. You can find all that at nordvpn.com/Quinton. Once again, that's nordvpn.com/QUINTON. Okay, so let's talk about my next 2 videos. The first thing is going to be a conclusion to our discussion about the History Channel, as I talk about the very worst of the worst that they have ever put out. Bad Nazi documentaries. This is certainly going to get demonetized, I'm fully aware of that, but talking about the failures of History Channel and not talking about some of the weird shit in that territory would be a huge sin in my opinion. So if you have any suggestions for where you would like me to take that topic, leave those thoughts in the comment section below. But more importantly, those of you who have been following me on Twitter for the last 5 months will know that I have been working on a huge video about Garfield, specifically analyzing a collection of Garfield lost media, which I am planning to release alongside this video. And I have officially decided that that video will be coming out on June the 5th, specifically June the 5th at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is going to be one of the biggest videos I've ever done. It's definitely the most expensive, and it's really important to me that people actually see this one. And it's also kind of longer than normal videos. It's about documentary length, which is ironic, and because of that, I really feel like YouTube will not naturally recommend it to people. So I would like it if we all bound together as a community and sort of got together on June 5th and enjoyed it together. We'll do a little premiere, we'll get some popcorn, you and I will hang out in the chat, and we'll have a good time watching, you know, this Garfield extravaganza. If you want to hear more about these next two videos, follow me on Twitter, and if you want to make sure that you don't miss them when I upload, hit subscribe below and set the bell to all notifications. Okay, play us out, Pat!
The Iranians are as if they're trying to provoke the United States to war. It's the most amazing thing. They continuously provoke us. And you can just see the tempers flaring in our nation saying, let's go over there and show those fellows a lesson. It's almost as if something is goading somebody there to bring us against them. Well, when we do that, and we certainly have a right to, then they will be weakened, and that will just set them up for a Soviet takeover.
Okay, so we're at the end slate now. You should see a tiny logo of my face on the screen somewhere. If you click that, you can subscribe. And more importantly, I have made a convenient little playlist for you guys of videos I've made in the past of more topics like this one, conspiracy videos. And I really think you guys will like this. I would appreciate it if you check that out. With that, I've been Quinton Reviews. All hail Bob.